Here we are, AP Biology, Chapter 17. This one is all about the evolution of plants and fungi and how they evolved to grow on land. As we work our way through this, we need to tie back into Chapter 16 because in Chapter 16 we recognized the evolution of prokaryotic cells as they turned into eukaryotic cells and then ultimately multicellular organisms. Plants are multicellular photosynthetic eukaryotic organisms, and so we'll naturally talk about them next. Now, there are some specific design that are found in plants that are not found in algae. One is that they have reproductive structures that contain spores and gametes. Number two, that they have leaves that actually do the photosynthesis for them. They have that cuticle that prevents water loss and allows for gas intake, which is CO2 in, oxygen out. And then they have a strong stem so that they can grow upright with roots to hold them in place. Now, this is important because all of these adaptations allow them to be on land versus being completely submerged in water. Whereas an algae, it does photosynthesis, it absorbs water, CO2, and minerals. It's actually getting that from the water environment. It doesn't have to have a specialized cell to do that. And it has a holdfast, which is kind of how it anchors itself into the bottom of the aquatic environment, whereas plants have their true roots that not only hold them in place, but help absorb the water and minerals for them from the ground that they're in. Now, what is different about algae and plants is that plants, because of their need to transport things around their whole entire organism, is they have developed the vascular tissue. And vascular tissue are specialized cells, and their job is to transport water and nutrients throughout the entire body. By doing that, they also provide internal support, which is very important. Now, where did the plants come from? As I said, that this is the logical next thing to talk about after we talked about prokaryotic evolving into eukaryotic going from single cell to multicellular. Now what we're talking about is the multicellular photosynthetic organisms, which you could also say as an algae. What the evidence suggests is that land plants came from green algae. And they actually think that they are the closest living relatives. There's a specific type of green algae. And so we can see this kind of natural progression. Now, what is the evolution of land plants? Well, the first plants that ever showed up on land are bryophytes. And bryophytes are kind of your liverworts and mosses. Then what we had was our seedless vascular plants. So we have plants with vascular tissue, so they can move nutrients around in specialized structures, but they don't have seeds. The last thing that has evolved with the most recent evolution in plants are those seeded plants, the angiosperms, the gymnosperms, those big, huge plants that flower, have sexual selection, things like that. Now, the most difficult thing about learning about plants is learning their life cycle, and you have to just memorize their life cycles. So there's two different things that we need to know. We need to know that there's haploid and diploid generations in a plant's life. So they have half their chromosomes and two copies of each chromosome, haploid and diploid. The haploid gametophyte, so when we are in a haploid stage, we are producing our gametophyte. The gametophyte is the organism or structure that will produce the sperm and egg by mitosis. That is not a typo. It is mitosis because we use meiosis to actually produce the gametophyte. And we'll see this in picture form. Now, once we have produced our male and female structures, the zygote is going to develop, and it's diploid, and the diploid turns into a sporophyte. Now, the sporophyte undergoes meiosis to make the haploid spores, which are what grow into the gametophyte. So let's look at this in kind of picture format, if you will. So here, let's just start with our sperm and our egg, each of which is haploid. When they come together in fertilization, we produce our diploid zygote. The diploid zygote reproduces through mitosis to become a multicellular organism that is called a sporophyte. The sporophyte then undergoes meiosis to make spores, which are haploid. The haploid spores then go through mitosis to grow into these large structures that are called gametophytes. The gametophytes are haploid. And so they're already cut in half the genetic material. And so in order to make the specialized sperm or egg, all they have to do is go through mitosis. Now, let's look at some special examples of this alteration of generations between haploid and diploid. So here's the earliest plants that evolved on Earth. They are the bryophytes. They do not have vascular tissue yet. We have not made those special structures yet. What are bryophytes? Mosses, hornworts, and liverworts, if you will. Notice they're low growing, they're close to the ground, and they're green because they do photosynthesis. Now, mosses, they are dominantly in the gametophyte generation, which means the gametophytes produce the sperm and they produce the egg and the swimming sperm. So in order for a moss to reproduce, there has to be liquid water for that sperm to swim in. Once the zygote develops, once the sperm and egg find each other in the water, then that zygote develops onto the gametophyte, and it produces this much smaller sporophyte. So let's look at this in picture format. So let's start with our sperm and egg. So here's our sperm, and here's our egg, and they're being released from the gametophyte plant, which is haploid. Again, the sperm have to have water around them so they can swim, and when they swim and fertilize an egg, we then have a zygote. The zygote goes through mitosis to produce a large structure, which is known as the sporophyte, which is diploid. The sporophyte then undergoes meiosis to produce single or haploid spores. These haploid spores find an anchor point and they grow up into either the male or female gametophytes. The male and female gametophytes produce the sperm and egg, but because they're already haploid, they're going to do that using mitosis. Now that we've completed the life cycle of a moss, what we can do is compare it to the life cycle of, let's say, another plant that requires water. Ferns are seedless vascular plants, and so they too need water. Why? They don't have seeds to spread their sperm and pollen around. Instead, they need the flagellated sperm to swim and fertilize. Now, ferns, which are like most plants, have a dominant sporophyte, whereas the moss had a dominant gametophyte. These guys have a dominant sporophyte. And so here's what it looks like. Again, I'm starting with the sperm and egg. So here's our sperm, here's our egg. They were produced from the gametophyte. Sperm is going to swim to the egg. Fertilization occurs, we produce our zygote. The zygote then undergoes mitosis to create a full-sized sporophyte. The sporophyte now is going to undergo meiosis to make spores. The spores are going to go through mitosis to produce a full-size gametophyte. The gametophyte is going to produce by mitosis the sperm and egg, which will then fertilize. So ferns and mosses are similar because they both have to have water for flagellated sperm to swim in. But a fern is different from a moss because the fern has the dominant sporophyte generation, whereas the moss has the dominant gametophyte. Now, there are higher level of plants that have seeds, and these are your gymnosperms and your angiosperms. Now, why did they develop last? Well, one thing is they have developed a way of transporting their sperm that does not require water, and that is their pollen. And they have found a way to protect the embryos or protect their zygote inside of a seed. And so now they're protecting the reproductive structures that ensure genetic success along the way. We'll talk about gymnosperms and angiosperms in a separate video.